Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everyone joining us on the webinar. My name is Tim Ward. I am the CEO of CluedIn, and we help companies become data-driven. Today, we are fortunate enough to be joined by one of our technology partners, Cognigy, who is the leader in conversational AI, and they are represented by Philip Helterwig, who is their CEO, and I look forward to hearing from Philip about halfway through the webinar, where he will educate us on the value of conversational AI when it is used in combination with the CluedIn Data Foundation. Today's webinar is all about, talking to our data, and really it's about the synergy that has come from the recent integration and partnership between CluedIn and Cognigy. And to start off the webinar, we're going to start on the CluedIn side of things. So how do you as a business establish a proper data foundation so that consumers, upstream consumers of this data, such as tools like Power BI or Tableau or maybe machine learning platforms, or in this case, Cognigy, can utilize this data foundation to give and gain value within your business? So to understand what we do at CluedIn to help our customers become data-driven, it's important for us to look at what we provide. And what we provide at CluedIn is what we call the data foundation. And what you can think of the data foundation as being is encapsulating what we call the four main pillars of becoming data-driven. And this all starts with a robust data integration story, making sure that your business has a consistent, scalable flow of data throughout your business to be able to fuel use cases. Now, in our industry, a lot of us are often saying that data by itself really has no value, and this is very much a true statement. And that's why it's important that the next pillar of the foundation is cleaning and preparation and organization of this data, making sure that we have accuracy, quality within our data, completeness in our records, and making sure this is the type of data that we're actually letting flow throughout the business. Now, once again, in the very much the modern day data landscape, still clean and accurate and complete data really is of no value without making sure that we can use this data with confidence. And therefore, the third pillar of the data foundation comes from the governance piece of CluedIn. Now, to cap off the final pillar, all this good, clean, accurate, complete data that's governed and tracked for lineage and tracked for data policies and making sure that we're compliant and managing consent in our data would really still be of no use if it wasn't very easy to access throughout the business. So the final pillar of the data foundation is really making it easy to unleash this data onto upstream consumers. And like I'd mentioned before, this could be BI software or machine learning platforms or tools like Cognigy to be able to form conversational AI solutions. Now, at CluedIn, we focus on building the data foundation so that our customers can focus on the use cases. And when we're talking about conversational AI, I'm sure that knowing more about your customer, machine learning, and business intelligence are very much value-adding. They're very much use cases that are value-adding when it comes into the context of conversational AI. I'm sure Phil will go over a couple of use cases, but for example, you could just foresee that being able to look up and find data on your customers using interfaces like voice, Alexa, Siri, or maybe something that can be front-facing to your customers, such as a chatbot or something that allows your customers to be able to find the answers to questions themselves. Now, one of the reasons why the data foundation exists is because if we look at the data landscape today, so I encapsulate the landscape as all the components that an enterprise business needs to become a lot more data-driven. And to be honest, it's very overwhelming. There's many different pieces to this story. And with the enterprises and customers that we work with, a lot of these companies already have a couple of these components in place. Some of the kind of regular components would be a data warehouse, maybe data governance and data catalog. Maybe some of these companies are looking into playing with technologies like the data lake. But without failure, really a lot of these enterprise businesses already have an on-premise or cloud story. They already have a backup and infrastructure story, and they already have a list of technologies that they use to drive their back office systems. However, really the idea behind the foundation is to be able to stitch all of these different components into a coherent and cohesive story to serve this data and make it available to the business. And with the businesses that we talk to, when they see something like this, it definitely resonates as, really at the end of the day, what the business is demanding is we need access to data that sits across our business. And when we access it, we need to make sure it's as ready as possible. It's clean, it's governed, it's gone through the legal teams, it's gone through the compliance teams. And this is typically the friction that these different business departments receive on a per use case basis. So we're really wanting to push all of this friction underneath the data foundation, and so the business can spend a lot more time on the use cases that, for example, you see up the top of this slide. Now, when we typically start talking to large enterprises, this is really where most of their time is spent. When we want to be able to get value out of our company data, there's a huge piece involved with an organizational effort, finding out who is the owner of that data, checking with legal and compliance teams to make sure that we can utilize it. And actually just physically getting the data is sometimes a very time-consuming process. Then there's this big piece of data preparation involved, making sure that we get the data in a format that the team can work with. We need to clean it. In a lot of cases, we need to blend multiple different data sets together into a unified set. And then we need to work on things like normalizing and standardization of values to make sure that we can apply it to the business use case. And the irony in this situation is that such a limited amount of time is actually spent on the value adding piece, the actual business use case. So with platforms like CluedIn, really this is where our customers move. There's such a larger emphasis put on the actual business use case. And it's really not hard to conceptualize why this is the case. And really, if we are proactively providing a foundation to be able to clean data and govern data in a centralized hub, you can start to imagine why the different use cases for this data suddenly becomes an accelerated type of experience. Now, I'm sure like most of you, you've had a similar situation to this. This is actually an example from one of our customers. Power BI is a fantastic business intelligence and visualization tool of data. The problem with these types of systems is that a lot of the time it kind of masks what's underneath. So it can sometimes mask maybe the accuracy and quality and overall really the quality of the data that sits below it and fueling these visualizations. And actually, for one of our customers, once they had placed CluedIn into their data pipeline and set it up as their data foundation that was delivering data to Power BI, what we realized is that CluedIn was able to see that the quality of the data was so significantly low that in many different situations, the management decisions that were being made off these dashboards, they would have been better off guessing in many situations. And the good news is that by placing a platform like CluedIn in, this same company was able to raise the overall quality and accuracy of data that was fueling these upstream systems. And better yet, they have a system in place to be able to increase the quality and accuracy of this data over time. Now, you've probably also seen and had experiences like this as well. We might look up a record across our different systems, and actually realize that we have multiple different kind of duplicate records. And what this means is that the data is really hard to trust. It's also really hard to utilize. We have to spend a lot of time in deduplicating and merging all of these records from different systems. And I can tell you right now, this is not always a simple thing to do. And the bottom line is that these source systems are typically the systems that are directly plugged into things like our data warehouse, or God forbid, directly to our Power BI system. And the bottom line is we need a story to plug this void. We need something to be able to help us with the data in and the data out. And this is really what CluedIn is about. And some of the ways that we help starts with the integration of data. So at CluedIn, we have over 200 pre-built integrations to the most popular of enterprise software stacks. These include databases, CRMs like Salesforce and Dynamics, and not to mention some of the more modern infrastructures like data lakes. Not to mention that you can also add your own custom integrations into this as well. Now, as that data comes flowing through the CluedIn foundation, one of the first pivotal steps that we take on this data is to score the data on multiple different metrics. So these metrics include things like completeness and accuracy and relevance and quality and validity. Now, all of these sound very synonymous, but in the data world, these are measuring very different aspects of overall quality of the data. Now, this is important because it's really important for upstream users of this foundation to gain trust and confidence that this data is something that they want to push into value add systems like Cognigy or Power BI or machine learning platforms. Now, it's at this point that one of the key design principles of the CluedIn Data Foundation shows its face. Now, unfortunately, most companies, especially enterprise, are still trying to solve their data problems with one type of database technology, and that's typically the relational database. Now, the relational database solves big problems in our data world, but the pivotal piece is that it doesn't solve and can't solve all of them. So we need to take quite a diverse approach to making sure that our foundation of data is giving us enough flexibility to analyze and explore our data from multiple different angles. And that's why within the CluedIn Data Foundation, we actually use 5 different database families to store the same data. And really, it's about all of these engines were designed to solve different problems in our data world. Now, one of the first things and one of the things that our customers gives us constant positive feedback is on CluedIn's engine to solve this problem of blending data from different systems. I mean, I myself being an engineer and having an engineering background, I've lost track of the amount of times that I've needed to blend data from a CRM system and a mail system and an analytics system, and there's no real easy way to be able to join this data. So this is something that CluedIn solves really well. So one of the first things we start to do within the platform is figure out what are the connections between all these pieces of data from different systems. Now, it's at this point that we optionally allow our customers to also hook into and enrich their data from external sources. Now, some of these sources are paid for example, Hoovers and People, but then some of the integrations are also to online, public, free data sets such as Open Corporates or Company House, or maybe something like Glassdoor. Now, the next stage in the pipeline is really about cleaning the data, standardizing the values to make sure that upstream users are much more ready to use this data out of the box. So if we take these 2 records, for example, here, we've got Barack Obama and Hussein Obama. Now, if you and I look at these 2 records, it's relatively easy for a human to say, well, I actually think this is the same person. it is much harder for a computer to be able to answer these types of questions. But this is some of the processing and some of the functionality that CluedIn is providing out of the box to be able to figure out if certain things are related or not. Now, what's also important is that as we're merging these different records and cleaning this data, we're also keeping a full lineage and history of all the changes that are either being applied automatically or manually, or maybe by some custom rules that your business has added into the CluedIn engine. Now, there's no magic to this. There are certain things that fall through the cracks. Now, by leaning on 5 different database technologies, we can actually solve a lot more of automatic cleaning than we could with historical types of technologies. But there are still things that need to be manually considered. So for everything that falls through the cracks of automatic cleaning, that gets loaded up into applications like CluedIn Clean. Now, this is really targeted at a data engineer to be able to solve these very specific data cleaning problems. Now, if we take a look at the gender column in this, and we can see that there are multiple different ways to represent the different genders. Now, if we're probably looking at using an example, some of these records might have come from the Salesforce CRM. Some of them might have come from maybe a custom system. And really, this is the chance for our data engineers to standardize these values into a common format or a common vocabulary. It's not necessary that we actually want to change these values in the source system. We might want to keep them as they are. But for any upstream consumer, such as Cognigy, we want a consistent experience with not only building their integrations, but if a user was to ask, hey, what is the gender of Tony Smith? You don't want it to say 0 or 1. You would rather it say something that's much more aesthetically pleasing and easier to understand what is the actual value. Now, one of the issues sometimes with these types of systems is, what if you have a lot of data? And what if you have really dirty data? And this does happen. So sometimes there's the thought of, how would I even deal with cleaning that much data? And because of this, we have our interface called CluedIn Train. Now, CluedIn Train falls under the machine learning banner, a topic called reinforcement learning. Essentially, it's kind of like a labeling system. And in this particular case, a business user is being asked to label certain data. In this example, we're asked, is push the name of an organization? It's up for that business user to answer simply yes or no. And one of the critical steps within here, it's not up for that business user to correct this data. For example, it's not the responsibility of this user to say, push is not an organization, it's actually a product that we've purchased. That's not really the use case behind this. And what this system is actually doing is it is teaching your CluedIn foundation to be able to understand the context behind your data. And as you can understand, your data looks very different to the next company's data. And this is really to help the automatic cleaning piece of CluedIn to get smarter and better over time. Now, like we alluded to before, what good is all of this free-flowing data that's clean and labeled and has increased the accuracy? It's much more standardized and normalized in values now. Really, what use would this be without being able to use this with confidence? So really, the next pillar is around data governance. And here you can see a small snippet of the dashboards that we provide to alert the business of high-risk data. Where is the risk? Where is the data located from a country perspective? What levels of encryption do you have? What's the distributions of types of data? Where is the personally identifying data? And to have this type of alert system in place really allows us to know what we are sending to the business. So if the business is requesting a certain amount of data, we know that we have the consent managed. We know that from our perspective, we are sending them data that is maybe encrypted, that is low risk, that doesn't contain PII data. And really if you were to do that, really just causing a lot of chaos upstream that's sometimes hard to actually realize is happening. So now that we have this good tracked data, we have the data lineage of where this data came in, who's modified it over time, what were the rules that were applied to clean this data, we want to use this. So there are a couple of ways that we will expose our data to consumers like Cognigy. And the first is a classic enterprise search. So making sure that we can search across what is the data that's available within this foundation. We can actually drill into these individual records and take a look at the unified view of this record. What's so important in a data foundation is that if I have a consumer like Cognigy, where I have an end user asking, who is the CEO of Cognigy? I want to make sure that there aren't 15 results all saying Phil Heltewig. I would rather have one unified record of Philip Heltewig and all his data connected in this one view. Now, my final slide before I pass over to Phil to give you an insight into conversational AI. The way that consumers interact with the CluedIn application is through our API. And I alluded to before a simple querying language to be able to surface the data out of CluedIn. And this is via a language called GraphQL. In this simple example, I'm saying I want all mail from Gmail. And the results that I want to get out, I'd like to project out the name and the ID and maybe a few extra properties. And this is exactly how different consumers can actually integrate into our platform. So that time has come. I will hand over and make presenter for Philip to introduce Cognigy from his side. Thank you, Philip.
Thank you very much, Tim. Can you hear me fine?
Yes.
Great. Well, thanks for the opportunity to present here today with you. I'm here to present on behalf of Cognigy, the producer of what's called a conversational AI platform. The conversational AI platform works on the premise that the conversational era is here. We see conversational interfaces evolving all around us. We have Alexas and Google Homes in our homes. We're using chatbots at work. We're using chatbots on our mobile devices and messengers. And we really believe that the conversational era has started and that a lot of enterprises are now looking into this and can thus use solutions like Cognigy. Just a couple of stats around this maybe. Business Insider says that 80% of enterprises will be using chatbots in one shape or another by 2020. That can be external-facing use cases in customer support or marketing. That can be internal-facing use cases, such as in HR, or as we will see later with the integration with CluedIn, as virtual assistants that can surface information to your employees. 15% of companies around the world are already using chatbots and handling their business communications through that new type of interface. 73% of consumers say that they'll leave brands that don't deliver consistent experiences. And that means that when you deliver a conversational experience, you shouldn't have one experience for your Alexa devices, another one for your Google Home devices, and so on, but that you should actually have a consistent experience where the conversation you're having through these various channels doesn't differ, but it's actually the same. Last but not least, 56% of people state that they would rather message than call customer service. And I guess that is especially true for the younger generations who grew up with messengers, with messaging apps, rather than us who may have grown up with email or with phone lines. So there's, of course, a lot of potential benefits for chatbots. Firstly, it's on 24/7. Secondly, you can, of course, get an instant response. But I think most importantly, chatbots are no longer these dumb little programs that can just answer very simple questions, but they can now answer complex questions as well, and they can harness data that sits in your organization through the integrations of the likes that we've done with CluedIn. Chatbots can also take you through full business processes. It's no longer, hey, what are your opening times? And then it tells you the opening time. Or it is, where can I change my booking? And then it sends you to a website where you can change your booking. But it can actually take you through the full process of changing that booking directly inside the chat interface. Now, when talking about use cases, as I said earlier, there's really a lot of different use cases in the enterprise, and those can be external-facing use cases or they can be internal-facing use cases. So if we pick a couple of those out here, in HR, we would have recruiting that is a very common use case. So you have a chatbot that helps people find jobs in your enterprise and then helps them through the application process. In sales, you have buying process automation or customer experience. So buying process automation would be helping your salespeople fill in the right information through in the CRM. Procurement can then use to trigger procurement projects through conversational AI and many, many more use cases. For example, in services, that's the typical customer service use case. That is where a customer would be helped by a chatbot rather than a human agent. And then, of course, if the chatbot cannot answer a question, then the human agent can take over the conversation. Last but not least, here shown on the lower left, we would have the virtual business assistant. And this is where the integration with CluedIn comes in. That is a virtual assistant that can access all the information you have given to it, or all the information you've given access to, and it can surface that information through a single interface, in this case, conversational interface. Now, I know that we have a rather technical audience here. So what we've done is we've put a quick diagram here that describes the stack of how everything works. The conversation starts at the top. Your users are coming in through a channel. That channel could be a messenger like Line Messenger, Facebook Messenger. It could be on Slack, could be on Teams. It could be through a voice interface like Alexa or Google Home, or it could be even through the phone lines through something like Twilio. That information then arrives at Cognigy and is then analyzed by our NLP and NLU engines. NLU stands for Natural Language Understanding. Here we extract the meaning of the text. What does the person actually want? We then take information from the user profile and the conversation context into account. So the conversation context is something like, where are we in the conversation, right? Have we just started, or are we already in the midst of a booking process where we have already selected a hotel? We then take this information and hit the conversation logic. In Cognigy, that's the conversation editor, which I'm going to show a little bit later as well. And here we define what are we going to answer back to the customer, depending on where we are in the conversation and depending on the information we have about the customer. More often than not, this relies on third-party integrations. So we need to hit some other system, some third-party system to get information. That can be direct access to a system like HubSpot or Salesforce. It could be a system like Sitecore to retrieve user information. It could be an ERP system. It could be a support ticket system, or it could be a system like CluedIn that makes access to the information that sits in these systems super easy through the GraphQL interface. Once the conversation logic has then figured out what to answer, it passes the information back to the user through the channel. All the while, we're collecting analytics, which again can be used by CluedIn, and we also have the capability for a human handover. Cognigy, as a conversational AI platform, delivers all these necessary components. We have graphical conversation editors, which make it very easy for business users to create and manage conversations similar to a content management system. We have conversation analytics that show how much is our bot used, but also what did the bot not understand and how can we improve it so that it does a better job the next time. We have line of business systems integration, like I explained with CRM and ERP systems, but of course also with systems like CluedIn. We have an advanced artificial intelligence in the platform that is used for our natural language processing and understanding to understand what does the sentence actually mean that the user has said. We also have contact management, which allows you to keep persistent data about your users. Maybe in my example later, we'll see if someone made a booking in a certain city, maybe the next time they come, we want to show them some specials in that same city. Or maybe when we have a restaurant and a booking engine that runs on conversational AI, maybe we know that that user is a vegan and will only eat vegan food, so we don't need to recommend some meat dishes. Last but not least, Cognigy runs SaaS and on-premise. So we make it as easy as possible for our customers, because if you can and want to run SaaS, that's of course super easy to do, but we can also run on-premise and embed in your current systems landscape. So with that, I'm going to show a quick demo, and I will show a generic Cognigy demo first of how conversational AI works and how you put it all together. And then I'm going to show a special demo that we put together for our CluedIn integration. So let me just pull that up here for you. All right, here we go. So we're going to start with a front-end demo, and this front-end demo is a demo of a web chat where we can book a hotel through a web chat interface. So I'm coming into this chat, and yes, this is on a website now, and it's centered here just for presentation purposes. It could sit on the lower right, and it could, of course, also sit on something like Facebook Messenger. I say, let's go to Asia, and it proposes some cities for me. It says, where would you like to go? Tokyo or Bangkok. I can click on these buttons. I can use the menus over here, or I can type something. Maybe I type Tokyo, sounds great. It then gives me some hotels from Tokyo. So here we already have the first systems integration. It pulls those, of course, directly from a booking system. The results here, they don't live in the bot itself. So I'll pick a hotel. It says Tokyo's a great place. The Shangri-La is a great place in Tokyo. The average price is $672. Do you want to make a booking? And I say, oh, a bit expensive. Maybe Bangkok it is. And I get some hotels in Bangkok now. So as you can see, I can talk rather freely. I pick a hotel here. That's only $92. And it says, do you want to make a booking? And it's going to ask me a couple of questions now, like, when do you want to leave? When do you want to come back? What's your first name, last name, email address, and some other questions. And what I can do using the artificial intelligence engine here, I can also give it information right off the bat. So I can say, yes, from tomorrow until next Monday. It's now not asking me for my arrival and departure dates because I've already given them. And now I'm going to go and say, okay, I'm Phil. My email address is at cognigy.com. Do you want to receive emails specials in the future? Yes, about flights. Thanks, we'll send you specials for flights. Thanks, Phil. We've booked the East Grand Hotel Saison for 3 nights for you, and that is, of course, correct. Now, if I come back the next time, we can see that I'm getting a different greeting, which is welcome, Phil. It's fantastic to have you back. The way that all this is put together is in what we call the Cognigy flow editor. And let me just close the preview here for a second. Here you can see a graphical representation of the conversation. And if I bring this up and I come in with my hi, you can see what does it actually do, right? Okay, it comes in here. It says, do we already have a favorite city set? Yes. Hi, welcome, Phil. It's fantastic to have you back. Are you looking for another hotel in Bangkok? And here we can also see the different channel outputs that we have. So if we come through Facebook, we send this. If we come through Alexa, we send this. If we come through Twilio, we send this. Now I say maybe Tokyo this time. You can see the conversation now takes a little different path here. It's doing a database request to get the hotels, and then it's outputting the hotels for me. Maybe I go like maybe Bangkok. And it now comes in, it does the same path here, but it now retrieves hotels in Bangkok. So now what we have in Cognigy is we have something called the Cognigy integration framework. And the integration framework allows us to integrate with other systems rather easily by writing JavaScript modules that then integrate with these systems. And one of the integrations we have is the CluedIn integration. The CluedIn integration exposes CluedIn directly within Cognigy, directly within the conversational AI. So we can then run CluedIn GraphQL queries to then retrieve information from CluedIn. We've set up a project here for that. we've set up a little flow, and using that flow, we can then retrieve information in live directly from CluedIn, and we have a little demo for that as well. I added a new background picture for this. I hope you enjoy this, Tim, because this is Tim. And we can now chat with what could be a virtual business assistant that sits on your desktop, and you can ask it questions and surface data in that way. So we can come in and we can have small talk, of course, as well, for some fun. And we could now go in and say something like, who do we know at CluedIn in Denmark? And it's now running the query in real time against the CluedIn system. And here we find some people. And what we've done is, if you click on it, then it's going to give you the email address, right? I can also ask something like, who is the CEO at CluedIn? And then it's going to give me that answer. It's Tim Ward. And who is the CEO at Cognigy? And then here we get me. The answer is Phil Heltewig. And of course, it's context sensitive. So we could say something like, what is his email? And it will say the email of Phil Heltewig is, and then here we have my private email address for everyone to see. So you can see, you can use the power of the CluedIn data engine and expose it through something like conversational AI, which is, of course, a very accessible interface. Right? You could have this on your mobile, you could have it on a desktop, you could have it integrated into your SAP Navigator and your SAP Assistant. It really doesn't matter. And what you do by exposing that is you make it really accessible to your employees, and you expose the whole wealth of information that you have inside your organization in a really nice way. Thank you very much. That is what I was going to show, and I'm going to hand it back to Tim.
Thank you, Phil. We have a couple of questions, and I'm hoping you can answer them. The first one is targeted towards you, and it is on the example you used where you were typing in the different countries for Tokyo and Bangkok. And the question asks, is it keyword trigger based, or is there a little bit more smarts going on in there? And I assume really this answer lies around the NLP and the NLU engine.
Sure. The answer is that it's both. So in NLU, you're doing two things. You're doing one thing which is called intent mapping, and you're doing the other thing which is called slot mapping. Slot mapping is finding words like Tokyo and Bangkok and so on. And there's really, I mean, it is a rather nifty engine that sits behind that, but you do not require machine learning to do slot mapping, right? It does things like finding the slots. It finds a lot of auxiliary information about the slots. Is a number attached to it. We do actually use output of the machine learning algorithms for that. It finds out whether it is positive or negative. So you could say something like, I want to order a pizza with ham, but not cheese, but definitely no cheese, or something like this. And then it would give you ham and cheese as a topping, but ham would have a positive marker and cheese would have a negative marker. So that is the slot mapping. The intent mapping is fully based on very advanced machine learning algorithms. We're actually using several algorithms that we're running at the same time against an input sentence. And we are then scoring that and mashing up the scores from these different algorithms. And we have those for many languages. And actually one of the languages, coincidentally, is also Danish, because we have a machine learning engineer who is from Denmark and who built a Danish model for that. If you look on our GitHub page, we do have evaluation results and evaluation scripts on that, which shows that our NLU parser is actually on par, if not above, of that for IBM Watson, Google Dialogflow, and Microsoft Lewis.
Perfect. I actually will ask our audience to, if they have any questions, to pose them in the questions window that should be available to you within the GoToWebinar control panel. And in the meantime, I actually have a question to pose to you as well, Phil. I think one of the things that when we talk to our customers that there is a lot of demand in is the ways to decrease the time for a customer to having success. And I think the good case was not only the cases you saw before in booking a hotel, but a lot of our customers have a support department where they handle quite a lot of questions a day. How do you foresee a Cognigy CluedIn setup acting and building value for these types of customers?
Well, I think anywhere where you need access to data, this can actually be very, very helpful, right? Of course, if you're in a customer support case, you need to see who should actually have access to what data and so on. And I think one of the premises of CluedIn is that CluedIn propagates open data access. So if it comes to external use cases, I think that's probably something Tim should speak a little bit more about. I see the main value of this really when it comes to employees internally accessing the data through something like a conversational interface.
Mm-hmm. How do you handle different lingo? I know within CluedIn we have a semantic layer that allows us to sometimes if we have some contacts that are coming in from a CRM, sometimes we might call them a contact, sometimes it might be a person. If it was an employee, we might want to classify them as an employee or maybe a worker or something. How do you handle it on the Cognigy side, this kind of lingo?
Yeah. So there's different ways of doing this, right? Of course, you can apply some machine learning algorithms to automatically figure out what's called entities. That's called natural entity recognition. You can use that and then shoot that against the CluedIn system. What you can also do is that you actually take an export of the data of the, for example, person entities that you have in CluedIn, and via the API automatically ingest that in Cognigy to make sure that all the people that you have in CluedIn, all the person entities, can then also be found. So it really depends on, do you want to rely and trust in the machine learning algorithms to find out that something is a name? And of course, with something like Michael Knight or whatever, that's relatively easy and it will work. But if you have some maybe Indian names or I don't know, Finnish names, then it might not catch those. So in those cases, in order to be 100% sure, what we would say is ingest the data at a regular basis. And that is the same we're telling our customers, for example, when it comes to product search. A lot of products have names that will not be recognized by any machine learning algorithm, like a glue IBB5569K. So what we recommend, if there's no pattern that can be found to those names, that they ingest the names on a regular basis through the API so that they can be found.
Just from a personal perspective, I find that in Denmark we ride our bikes around a lot, and if I'm going in between customers, I'll take my bike and I have my phone in, which is attached to my headphones, and these are the wired ones that I have. And of course, if I need to call someone, I will trigger Siri and say, call this person, maybe call my wife. And it does a really good job at that type of interfacing. But what I see this adding in is with the Cognigy is really the interface between Siri and something. And with the CluedIn backing, what I can see is that I can really start to do more in-depth research on my way to the next customer, instead of asking what's the address of this customer, which things like Siri can look up and use, Apple Maps or Google Maps. I can really start to ask questions like, what were the last 3 emails that our company sent them? And it might not have been just my emails. It might have been another salesperson that's working on this particular deal with me. And to have that recall and to have it understand the natural language behind it, I see that as one of the personal use cases that I have with this type of partnership.
Yeah, exactly, and that would fall into the area of sales enablement, right? Where you could even in Cognigy define something like, "Hey, give me the 1-minute quick update on company X," And it then fires off 10 or 20 different requests to CluedIn, collects all kinds of information, compiles that quick update, and then reads it out back to the user. The one thing, of course, to keep in mind is that all these systems, CluedIn, also Cognigy, work with text input. And the text input relies on the speech-to-text engine that converts your verbal request into the text. So if Siri does a good job at converting your spoken word to text, including special company names and things like that, then you're going to get a good result out of it. If not, then there are other ways to do this as well. Like if you use Microsoft's speech-to-text capabilities or Google's speech-to-text capabilities, you as an enterprise can actually inject words into their speech-to-text models to make sure that they will be recognized the next time you say that word. So there are a lot of ways. There are a lot of ways to do that, but of course, we are talking about algorithms here. We're talking about statistical algorithms. So most of the time they will work, but sometimes they might just not give you the right output. And if I say, what do we have on company X, and it doesn't come out with company X, but it comes out with croissant X, then of course I'm not getting anything from Cognigy, and I'm not getting anything from CluedIn either.
Yes. Now this brings up a good point of kind of statistical confidence, that when you're working in this kind of fuzzy way of, you're not just looking up things via known IDs. There's a little bit more fuzziness. Of course, we no longer work in a kind of a 0 or 1 type of world where there's a fuzziness factor in that. And one of the ways that we can help with this at CluedIn is that, as shown in the demonstration, if we start to get questions back, you can also ask CluedIn, and what confidence level do you have with that data? So if we asked who is the CEO of Cognigy, and we found that it brought back maybe another contact at Cognigy, but that was really because that's the only person that we know at Cognigy, and their position was very close to that. Well, by asking CluedIn the confidence level, it will come back with a kind of a very low score, saying, listen, I think with very low confidence that it's actually Sasha, instead of the much more confident result. So I would like to extend my thanks to everybody who joined us on the webinar today. We will be sending out the materials so you can have them, and both my and Phil's contact details will be in that, in case you're wanting to get in touch and to put together a kind of a solution that involves conversational AI, and having that backed by a proper data foundation to fuel these systems with data that sits across your business. So I will wish everyone a good morning, a good evening, a good afternoon, and thank you very much for spending your time with us. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.